Anne arrives. Ooh. Who arrives to Green Gable? Anne. One sunny afternoon in June, Mrs. Rachel Lynde looked out her window. To her surprise, she saw Matthew Cuthbert. He was passing by in his horse and buggy. Matthew and his sister Marilla lived at Green Gables next door to Mrs. Lynde. Where is Matthew going at this time of the day? Mrs. Lynde wondered. And why is he wearing his best suit? Mrs. Lynde knew all the comings and goings in Avonlea, but she didn't know about this one. I must visit Marilla and find out, she decided. At Green Gables, Marilla was busy knitting. We have decided to adopt an orphan boy, she explained to Mrs. Lynde. We need help on the farm. Now Mrs. Lynde was truly surprised. An orphan? But Marilla, the orphan is coming on today's train, added Marilla. Mrs. Lynde did not approve. Oh, mark my words, this is a mistake, she said. Chapter 2. When Matthew arrived at the train station, he didn't see a boy, but he did see a girl. Under her old sailor hat were 2 red braids. She had a pointed, freckled face and large eyes. She was holding a worn carpet bag. Matthew was very shy. He didn't know what to do. The girl was not shy. Are you Matthew Cuthbert of Green Gables? She stuck out her hand. Matthew shook it. I'm very glad to see you, said the girl. Her voice was sweet and clear. If you didn't come, I was going to sleep in the cherry tree. It would be lovely to sleep in a tree. Can you imagine it? But I would rather go to Green Gables. What could Matthew say so that? Come along, he told her. Chapter 3. The whole drive back, the orphan girl kept talking. There is so little scope for the imagination in an orphanage. But here, she gasped at everything she saw, and she made up names for all the places they passed. She named the avenue the White Way of Delight. She named the pond the Lake of Shining Waters. The only name she didn't mention was her own. Matthew was too shy to ask. I feel nearly perfectly happy, said the girl. But I can't be perfectly happy because, well, she held up a braid. What color is this? Red, replied Matthew. Yes, I can imagine anything, except I cannot imagine away my red hair. It is one of my lifelong sorrows. She gave a great sigh. Then she added, Am I talking too much? I can stop if I try hard. I don't mind, he said. Already Matthew liked this strange little girl. But she was a girl, not a boy. Marilla would not be happy. Chapter 4. Matthew was right. Where is the boy? Exclaimed Marilla. She stared at the girl. This is a pretty piece of business. You don't want me? The girl burst into tears. Oh, this is the most tragical thing that ever happened to me. Marilla sighed. Dry your eyes, child. We won't turn you out tonight. What's your name? Anne Shirley. Anne spelled with an E. What difference does spelling make? Oh, such a difference, said Anne. Anne with an E looks so much nicer. Marilla sighed again. Very well then. Anne with an E, it is time for supper. But Anne couldn't eat. She would have to return to the orphanage. As soon as she had seen Green Gables, she felt it was home. Now it wouldn't be. She was in the depths of despair. That night, she cried herself to sleep. Not even the beautiful cherry tree outside her window made her feel better. Poor Anne. Chapter 5. In the morning, cherry sunshine poured through the window. The cherry tree tapped its branches on the grass. Like it was saying, "Good morning." The lake of shining water sparkled in the distance. Anne felt better. "It's such a lovely morning," she said at breakfast. "But I like rainy mornings too. Aren't our mornings interesting? You never know what might happen." Matthew smiled. Marilla muttered, "For pity's sake. I will tell you what is happening. I'm talking you to Mrs. Spencer. Mrs. Spencer will return you to the orphanage." Mrs. Spencer had brought Anne on the train. She walked at the orphanage. For once, Anne had nothing to say. After breakfast, Marilla and Anne went to Mrs. Spencer's house. On the way, Anne tried to keep her spirits up. But it was hard, especially when they arrived. "Oh, I'm sorry," said Mrs. Spencer when Marilla told them about the mistake. "But what good luck. Anne doesn't have to go to the orphanage. Mrs. Bluewet is here looking for a girl to take care of her children." said Mrs. Blewett, eyeing Anne. "There's not much to you, but you are wiry. I respect you to earn your keep." Mean Mrs. Blewett wanted Anne to come work for her. Marilla paused. "Well, I don't know," she said slowly. As stern as Marilla could be, she was also kind. "Maybe we will keep her," Marilla told Mrs. Spencer. "Did you really say that?" whispered Anne as she and Marilla walked home. "Or did I imagine it?" "If you want to stay here, you must behave yourself, Anne," said Marilla, "and try to control your imagination." "Oh, I will try so hard to be good," said Anne. "It will be uphill work, but I will do my best." Chapter 6. Anne did all her chores, just like Marilla wanted. In her free time, she played and made up new names. Anne named the cherry tree outside her window the Snow Queen, and the flower on her windowsill Bunny. "I don't believe in calling things names that don't belong to them." "Oh," said Marilla. "But don't you ever imagine things differently from what they really are?" asked Anne. "No," said Marilla. "Oh, Marilla, how much you miss," said Anne. Still, everything was going well until Anne's manners were put to the test. Mrs. Lynde came over to meet Anne. She clucked her tongue. "Oh, what a mistake, didn't I tell you? She's terribly skinny, Marilla. Just look at those freckles. And that hair, red as carrot." Anne's face turned as red as her hair. "Oh, how dare you! You are a rude, unfeeling woman." Mrs. Lynde's eyes went wide. Anne stamped her foot. Stump, stump. Mrs. Lynde's eyes went wider. "Anne Shirley," exclaimed Marilla, "go to your room at once." Chapter 7. Anne lay on her bed and sobbed. Marilla came up. "You must apologize," she said. "I will never apologize," cried Anne. "You will stay in your room until you do," said Marilla sternly. "You said you would behave, but you haven't." All that evening, Anne stayed in her room. All the next day, too. That night, Matthew tiptoed upstairs. "It was awfully quiet without you at supper," he said. "Maybe you could apologize for me? I've always wanted you to stay here." Anne sniffed. You really want me? No one has ever wanted me before. Matthew nodded. Anne took a deep breath. For you, Matt, I will. Just don't tell Marilla I said anything, added Matthew. Wild horses won't drag the secret from me, said Anne. Chapter 8. The next day, Anne went to Mrs. Lynde's house with Marilla. Anne was busy imagining. She was imagining the best apology ever. When they arrived, Anne threw herself down on her knees. Oh dear, Mrs. Lynde, I could never express how sorry I am. Not even if I used a whole dictionary. Mrs. Lynde, please, please, please forgive me. If you refuse, it will be another one of my lifelong sorrows. Anne clasped her hands. Oh, there, child, get up, said Mrs. Lynde heartily. Of course I forgive you. I'm sorry too. I will speak my mind. So do I, thought Anne. And, added Mrs. Lynde, your hair is bound to turn into a handsome auburn as you grow. Oh, Mrs. Lynde, said Anne, you have given me hope. Mrs. Lynde smiled. Then she said, on the whole, Marilla, I like her. So did Marilla. She smiled too. Good, because she's staying with us at Green Gables. Come on, Anne, time to go home. Anne's eyes sparkled. Marilla and Anne walked back to Green Gables. Anne slipped her hand into Marilla's. Oh, how wonderful it is to be going home and know it's home. Green Gables is the dearest, loveliest spot in the world. I love it already. She had been Anne of nowhere in particular for as long as she could remember. It was a million times nicer to be Anne of Green Gables.
I want to read one more.